Part 1. General Information. There is no duty above ours, and our vigilance will never end. We are destined for eternal repentance, voluntary self-sacrifice, endless service. We are the sentinels who shall never be relieved, yet we stand watch gladly, for we bow to him who gave us life, and in return we are bound to protect him. We shall never attain redemption, for we do not deserve it, but only fools might think that this diminishes our resolve. The Adeptus Custodes are the personal bodyguards of the Emperor. For 10,000 years they have safeguarded the Emperor of mankind and defended the gates of his palace. But now the golden blades are unsheathing. For the first time since the Great Crusade, entire armies of 10,000 battle among the stars. Woe betides those who stand against them. Nowhere in the Imperium can more skilled and formidable warriors be found than the Emperor's Praetorians. Their biochemistry is altered from childhood, transforming the custodians into unmatched warriors, tacticians, and bodyguards. They are the embodiment of doom for any who oppose the will of the master of mankind. Each of these guardians possesses astonishing talents. Their martial prowess and leadership, mastery of the blade, and intuition appear almost supernatural. The Adeptus Custodes surpass the Space Marines to the extent that the post-human Astartes surpass ordinary soldiers. The Emperor's Praetorians are an unattainable elite, endowed with unmatched physical and spiritual strength. However, unlike the Space Marines, where battle brothers fight in squads working together, every custodian always fights alone. Each of these solitary warriors wields weapons made for them and dons masterfully crafted armor meticulously fitted to their body. With such equipment, one custodian is not inferior to facing a dozen skilled opponents. If Praetorians are deployed in significant numbers, they simply sweep away enemy armies, vastly outnumbered though they may be. When shield companies of the golden shining Adeptus Custodes charge into attack, the Emperor's enemies scatter before them like smoke driven away by the storm's gale. In battle, the Praetorians are akin to mythic heroes come to life. Using all manners of equipment from their arsenal, they achieve unthinkable victories. The swift vanguard forces of the Virtus Praetors on their Dawn Eagles decimate enemy armor, while the Alaris Terminators with equal ease fell the heretical leaders and colossal monsters with their blades. It is too late when the enemy realizes that the battle is lost. The Emperor's Praetorians have slaughtered their commanders, reduced their machines to piles of wreckage and cleaved deep into their ranks. The foes can only flee in panic, but even escape is unlikely to save them from annihilation. Such a fate awaits all who dare defy the Emperor of mankind. Yet even a small contingent of custodians can break through enemy lines in a whirlwind of bloodied blades. These warriors are, first and foremost, guardians, not conquerors. They are the Emperor's bodyguards, the so-called 10,000, who have been safeguarding their lord from dangers since time immemorial. The Emperor began his ascent on Terra during the darkest period of an era known as the Old Night. The cradle of humanity had then become a nightmare abode, where armies of non-human creatures fought under the command of insane warlords, subjugated to the will of corrupt and depraved overlords. It is no surprise that the chronicles preserved from those dreadful times are locked away in the deepest dungeons of the imperial palace. However, if a brave scholar were to penetrate these ancient archives, he would find that even in the earliest sources recounting the Emperor's deeds, there are mentions of the warriors accompanying him, tall and mighty with plumed helmets and golden spears, amidst all the horrors of the Unification Wars, through the doomed rebellion of the Thunder Warriors, and in the early stages of the creation of the Imperium, the Custodian Guard remained the loyal blades in the service of the Master of mankind. It is said that there was no sight in history more majestic than the Golden Legion marching to battle under the leadership of the Emperor. Over many centuries, the fighters of the Legio Custodes, as they were then called, covered themselves in unfading glory. No army could withstand them, led by the incomparable Captain General Constantine Valdor. Even during the era of the heresy, a civil war of galactic scale, the Emperor's Praetorians maintained their relentless determination and impeccable loyalty. Throughout the Imperium, they were lauded as the greatest warriors of the master of mankind. But in the decisive hour of this epical confrontation, the Custodians tasted the bitterness of defeat for the first time. Warmaster Horus struck down the master of mankind, and his bodyguards failed to fulfill their sworn oath. In the following millennia, the Praetorians carried the heaviest burden of shame and dishonor on their shoulders. After the civil war ended, the Legio Custodes were transformed into the Adeptus Custodes. They no longer fought alongside their sovereign, for the emperor had become a maimed half-corpse, and only the machinery of the Golden Throne prevented his mighty spirit from extinguishing. Henceforth, the Praetorians had a different mission: to preserve the remains of their beloved creator at any cost. As a sign of their failure, the disgraced bodyguards donned mournful black garments, a attire of sorrow that they have since not removed for many thousands of years. The Adeptus Custodes maintained their vigilant watch for long centuries. Because phenomenal genetic technologies were employed in their creation, these warriors do not age like ordinary men, and only the gravest of wounds can disrupt their supposedly endless lives. Many of the Praetorians are significantly older than 1,000 years, and throughout their existence the fighters have continuously honed their skills, refined themselves in all manner of secret knowledge and scientific disciplines, as well as practiced tactical maneuvers for any possible turn of events. Through ritual doctrines known as the Blood Games, the Custodians incessantly test the defences of Terra. During these games, the Praetorians, under various guises, examine all possible routes through which an enemy might breach the walls and gates, safeguarding the Golden Throne. Furthermore, the Emperor's bodyguards employ fractal mind exercises, strategic calculations spanning entire centuries, and complex combat simulations in hallucinariums to maintain perfect battle readiness in case they must once more wage war beyond the planet. After the enigmatic Great Rift occurred, and Robert Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, once again assumed the role of Lord Commander of the Imperium, the time had finally come. Across the galaxy, armies of chaos-worshipping renegades and howling hordes of demons burst forth from ethereal storms. The Sol system itself has come under attack. Humanity's bitterest foes have drawn within striking distance of Holy Terra. It gradually became apparent that the Adeptus Custodes could no longer bear a silent vigil in the palace, while the Imperium turns to ashes, and the flames of war edge ever closer with each passing day. Threats to the Golden Throne are so severe that they must be eliminated in advance before gaining strength. Therefore, leaving behind a garrison of custodians to guard the Emperor on Terra, dozens of shield companies set out to the stars to annihilate the enemies threatening to again wrest their master from them. The attacks of the Praetorians are like a blade of the Emperor's own fury, honed over 10 millennia of preparation. Of course, since the times of the heresy, the Custodians have participated in other wars as well. Mere mortals would lose their minds in terror if they learned of the secret campaigns that the Emperor's guards conducted both within and beyond the throne world. The bodyguards held back the onslaught of lethal inhabitants, sealed with the runes of the crypt under the Himalaic shelf. They conducted forays into warp spaces filled with living nightmares, eradicated cults in the endless tunnels of the Manufactura Mericum, and executed followers of extremely radical inquisitors convinced that the Emperor could achieve true ascension only after death. Such battles did not cease even after 10,000 took the offensive to begin eradicating traitors and heretics across all known space. Like the Imperium as a whole, the Adeptus Custodes fight on all fronts. For a whole century I stood post, surrounded by the somber shadows of the Sanctum Imperialis, as motionless as a statue, yet always vigilant, ever ready to repel any unseen threat. Days, months, and years rushed unrestrained beyond these walls, but within them almost nothing moved and nothing changed. For 100 years I remained inactive, merely waiting, and yet, should any danger arise, I would have struck down the foe in an instant. Exactly a century have I stood post, and now as my watch ends, I tell you this: patience is a weapon too. In the dark age of technology, mankind nearly perished due to its own hubris. Leaving their cradle, humanity grew increasingly confident as they traversed among the stars. due to their inherent adaptability and martial spirit. Science and technology advanced at a breathtaking pace at the time, enabling the colonization of ever more distant worlds. The colossal expanses of the universe seemed to narrow as the capabilities of Terra's children grew, and the ruthless light of human progress drove Xenos civilizations into the shadows at the galaxy's fringes. A certain role in such successes was played by thinking machines, the constant development of new methods of interstellar travel, and the invention of increasingly unusual types of weapons. But the crucial factor in expansion became the ability and audacious resolve to alter the human genome. Believing in their own exclusivity, the tech-savvy monarchs quenched their unrestrainable curiosity and bent the laws of nature to their will, playing gods. Ultimately, such arrogance led humanity to catastrophe and then to the brink of total extinction. Planets were engulfed in bloody rebellions raised by local inhabitants, often unrecognizably altered after monstrous mutations. Genetic wars rolled across entire systems. The fire of Psi-apocalypse consumed the stars themselves. The gigantic human empire split apart in throes of terror and anarchy. An impenetrable veil of a long night descended. Terra found itself at the very center of this galactic disaster. The planet, once the jewel in humanity's crown, turned into a veritable hell, wrought by forbidden weapons and biological atrocities. Its inhabitants wandered in a darkness of ignorance. However, many of the technologies that destroyed civilization survived in caches within hermetically sealed bunkers and biomantic crypts. Gradually, driven by the whips of cruel dictators, humanity began climbing out of the abyss, and some of these caches inevitably fell into the hands of these self-proclaimed tyrants who were ready to wield the ancient weapons once again. Terra found itself under threat of annihilation. On its surface, barbarians born from genetic manipulation fought against resurrected undead stitched from pieces of flesh, executing the orders of madmen, fanatics, and bloodthirsty tech cultists. Most of the records from that era are forever lost, destroyed, or buried in the vast archives of the throne world. Nevertheless, a handful of people do know that it was during this period that the Emperor rose to power, and that he, whether a divine creation or a perfect superhuman, managed to wisely manage the treasuries of genetic data left behind by the former rulers of humanity. Relying on these ancient and dangerous technologies, as well as his own strengths, incredible and unknowable, the Emperor created warriors capable of uniting the planet. He faced a challenging task. He longed for peace for humanity, but success could only be achieved through military means. It is known by the most learned of imperial historiographers that in his early conquests, the Emperor employed living weapons, the legions of thunder warriors. The techno-barbarians who became powerful yet imperfect super-soldiers with limited lifespans fulfilled a specific task, after which they lost their usefulness to the master of mankind. When the thunder warriors realized that their days were numbered, the Emperor was already contemplating grander goals and was creating the first of those fighters who would later become the Space Marines. Even the most learned imperial sages cannot say when the master of mankind created the Custodians. The truth is hidden somewhere within the scattered testimonies of the past, stories told by primitive hieroglyphs or drawings on cave walls, and records preserved on stasis-locked piles of parchment or pages of tomes with genetic locks that none of the living can open. These documents speak of giant demigods who walked beside the Emperor, his reliable bodyguards and respected advisors privy to his secrets. The Legio Custodes fought alongside their lord at the walls of the Vilifactor's fortress and held back the baying beast hordes of trans-Nordic raiding tribes in a battle where the master of mankind slew the corpulent butcher god worshipped by the Northerners. Custodian blades took the head of Garsha the Decrier, pierced the heart of the Ur-Queen of Atlan, and drove back the iron fiends on the red fields of Primasalia. This is the little that remains in the echoes of those distant times. In the final years of the unification wars on Terra, the Thunder Warriors finally realized that the Creator had bestowed upon them a short lifespan and turned against him, feeling betrayed. It was then that an army of several hundred Custodians rose to defend the Emperor. It is believed that even at that time, they were led by the legendary Constantine Valdor. Suppressing the rebellion, the Praetorians ruthlessly exterminated the outdated Gene soldiers. When the merciless barbaric purge of the no longer needed armies ended, marking the worthy finish to an era of discord, the cradle of humanity achieved the long-awaited unity. For the further prosperity of mankind, the Emperor turned his gaze to the stars. In the subsequent years, the armadas of the Great Crusade departed Terra, destined to reclaim the galaxy. At the outset, they secured the Sol system, and the Emperor, demonstrating wisdom and diplomacy, forged an alliance with Mars. With technological support from the Adeptus Mechanicus, the campaign gained momentum, and the crusading forces surged into space. Many billions of soldiers of the Imperial Army, proud warships, legions of space marines, and numerous other units set out to reclaim humanity's stellar dominion. In the early stages of the crusade, it was led by the master of mankind himself. As the expansion continued, the crusading fleets became increasingly dispersed and started to operate autonomously, while also discovering the lost Primarchs, the sons of the Emperor. Wherever he went, he was followed by the Legio Custodes, an unstoppable golden host of 10,000 warriors, equipped not only with the best weapons and armor, but also with all manner of secret archaeotech specimens unearthed by the armies of Terra on ancient human planets. Beyond such curiosities as anti-gravitational battle tanks and terrifyingly powerful disintegrators, the Praetorians had access to the finest examples of Imperial weaponry. Their land raiders possessed exceptionally martial spirits, and their bolters, power blades, and heavy weapons were handcrafted by the most gifted artisans. For such regal and incredibly skilled warriors deserved nothing less. Wherever the Emperor fought, whether in the hellish citadel of the overmancers of Styx, or in the empire of pure-blood kings built on lies, in the brutal battles of the Cold Harvest, or the triumphant conquest of Ulanor, alongside him fought the invincible Legio Custodes. Led by the master of mankind himself, the Praetorians brought doom to any foe, yet the most severe tragic trial awaited them. Under the aegis of the Emperor, it seemed humanity was destined to dominate the galaxy, but it turned out otherwise. Committing the most treacherous betrayal, exactly half of the Space Marine Primarchs turned against their father. Thus ignited a civil war more ferocious than any conflict experienced by humanity until then. It was called the Horus Heresy, and it led to a tragedy of universal proportions. It should be noted that while the brotherhoods of Space Marines fiercely fought among themselves, and the Imperial Army and Mechanicum were torn by brutal internal conflicts, the Legio Custodes, strangely enough, were barely involved in the battle. The few surviving records from those dark times merely hint at what the Praetorians were occupied with. There are suggestions that during the years of the heresy, another monstrous war raged, invisible to the rest of the Imperium, one that only the Adeptus Custodes had a chance to win. Nevertheless, in that tumultuous epoch, the 10,000 did engage in two crucial battles. The burning of Prospero, presumably the first armed conflict of the heresy, and the siege of Terra. The assault on Prospero occurred even before Horus openly rebelled. It was intended as a punishment for the sorcerer Primarch Magnus the Red and his wayward Thousand Sons Legion. On their distant homeworld, they recklessly continued to use psychic abilities and delve deeper into the warp, directly violating the Edict of Nicaea. No one knows exactly what prompted the Emperor to finally intervene, but according to fragmentary information from various sources, a psychic catastrophe occurred on Terra, directly linked to the mental gift of the Crimson King. One way or another, Constantine Valdor and his Legio Custodes were entrusted with leading the task force intended to capture Magnus and bring him from Prospero to face the judgment of his father. From the very first days of their existence, the Praetorians always wielded the magisterium Lex Ultima, a symbol of high status indicating that its bearer answers only to the Emperor himself, yet never before had they faced a task of such complexity. However, Valdor was prepared to fulfill his duty without hesitation. He planned to act through diplomatic means, but the Space Wolves joined their forces with Constantine under the command of Primarch Leman Russ, and the matter ended in merciless bloodshed. The Fenrician, incited by Horus's treacherous words and his own unreasoned enmity towards his brother sorcerer, transformed from Magnus's presumed captor into his executioner. Although the Captain General initially rejected Russ's insistent demands, it soon became evident that the warlocks of Prospero were tainted by corruption, forcing Valdor to take action. He led his golden-armoured brethren to the surface of the cursed planet, where the Custodes fought a terrible battle against many followers of the Crimson King, aided by the Sisters of Silence, whose null aura blocked the psychic attacks of the Thousand Suns. Only with the assistance of Constantine's warriors were Russ's legionnaires able to escape battle before the entire planet was consumed by the howling warp rift. The events on Prospero were followed by a period of uncertainty and indecision. But when war approached the throne world, no one doubted where the line of defense lay. During the siege of colossal proportions, the Legio Custodes, along with loyal Astartes defending the master of mankind and his palace, showed no mercy to the traitor Astartes. The Praetorians did not falter, even as megatons of ordnance rained from the blazing heavens. Demonic spawn broke through the veil of reality, and the traitor Titans unleashed salvos from their guns capable of obliterating cities upon the fortress walls. Throughout that nightmarish battle, Valdor and his 10,000 valiantly repelled one assault after another. Despite the heroism of the Custodes, to their eternal shame they did not fulfill the most crucial task before them. As is known, during the Siege of Terra, the War Master directed the course of the battles from afar, from the flagship, vengeful spirit hovering in orbit. At the very end of the assault, when the throne world was ablaze and the forces of the traitors ravaged the outer territories of the palace, Horus suddenly lowered the shields of his battle barge. Why he did this, no one knows. Perhaps there remained a fragment of his old personality in Lupercal, seeking to thwart the designs of the dark gods. Or perhaps the traitor wanted to have one last meeting with the Emperor and strike down his father with his own hand. One way or another, the Master of Mankind immediately assembled an elite detachment of Primarchs, Space Marines and Custodians, and under his command, the assault group teleported aboard the shieldless ship. A monstrous battle awaited them. The Emperor's warriors, scattered throughout the desecrated craft, had to fight for their very lives. Sanguinius, the Lord of the Blood Angels, perished by Horus's claw, but this loss was not the most grievous. Despite the efforts of the Legio Custodes, they could not contend with Lupercal, endowed with supernatural strength. Only the father could overcome the rebellious genetic son, but victory came at a great cost. The War Master maimed the Emperor with blows fueled by the power of the warp, and when the Loyalists finally arrived to help, life barely flickered within him. Since then, he has been doomed to eternally remain on the Golden Throne, whose systems prevent him from crossing into oblivion. In such a state, he continues to guide and protect the faithful citizens of the Imperium. Should the Emperor's life finally end, humanity is doomed to follow soon after. Heracles described a precise arc with the Guardian Spear. The power blade of the weapon, slicing through ceramite, flesh and bone, severed the traitor's neck, and his helmet, along with his head, bounced down the steps. Scarlet blood gushed from the wound, kicking the swaying corpse in the stomach. The custodian sent it after the detached head, but frowned, as he noticed two more traitors in the armour of the Sons of Horus appearing at the base of the stairs. Lowering his halberd, the Praetorian unleashed a barrage of rounds from the integrated bolter upon the enemies. One of them was thrown backward with a shredded breastplate, while the other stood his ground and charged up the steps, firing in return. The custodians staggered under the bolt impacts, yet none penetrated the auramite armour. A less worthy warrior in his place would mock the enemy, revelling in his superiority. Heracles merely darted forward like lightning and pierced the faceplate of the legionnaire's helmet, who failed to dodge in time. "Area clear!" the custodian transmitted over the vox, disdainfully shaking the dead traitor off his spear. "The western staircase is also clear," Litinus's response came through, "Engaging at the northern arch," reported Artoris, and Heracles heard the clash of blades and the roar of bolters in the background. They wanted to break through the Peacemaker's square again. "The third time now," remarked the Praetorian, moving at a steady pace to aid his comrade. "Anyone more perceptive would have realized we are unbreakable." "The perceptive would not have turned away from the Emperor," Litinus responded. "True," Heracles agreed, the sounds of shooting growing louder in his ears. "Then our duty is to punish them for their folly." Rounding a corner, he cycled his Guardian Spear's autoloaders and ran through a mnemic assessment of the Peacemaker's square, its approaches, fire arcs, blind spots and trap zones. Within several seconds, the Custodian reached the northern arch. From the passage erupted the din of battle, and smoke streamed forth, pierced by flashes of muzzle fire. Heracles stood shoulder to shoulder with Artoris, noting to himself that the golden armour of his comrade was drenched with the blood of foes. "Glad to see you," said the latter, embedding rounds into the traitor legionaries advancing amidst the park's burning trees. "World-eaters!" Heracles uttered with venom, also opening fire. "Mad savages! Exactly so!" Litinus supported him, taking his place in their improvised firing line. "Let us exterminate them!" The Praetorians moved together towards the treacherous ones. Every bolt shell of the Custodians unerringly found its mark. Every impeccably calculated step and blade swing turned the deceitful berserkers' attack against them. As blood plattered around and the corpses of Astartes fell with a crash, Heracles felt within him a firm resolve. He understood that as long as even one Custodian lived, the Emperor's palace would not fall. With the end of the heresy, the Legio Custodes, transformed into the Adeptus Custodes, donned mourning, for they had suffered a disgraceful failure. The warriors do not seek to forget it, and do not seek forgiveness, but even now they maintain a vigil that does not pause for a moment. For 100 centuries, the Adeptus Custodes have protected the Golden Throne, and during this time, no enemy has managed to penetrate the Sanctum Imperialis. The Praetorians undertake many duties on Terra. They guard not only the huge gates leading into the throne room of the Emperor, but also the entire territory of the palace sprawled across an entire continent, and one can imagine how arduous a task that is. The Imperial Palace is a true maze of fortresses, cathedrals, arsenal catacombs, residential macro-complexes, judiciariums, archives, sanctuaries, spaceports, and countless other structures. Only the Custodians decide who shall receive an audience with the Emperor, and such an honour is accorded to but a few. They patrol the palace halls, amidst which endless queues of petitioners snake, seeking out heretics or carriers of xeno-taint who have cunningly managed to breach the outer barriers. The Adeptus Custodes also observes the soul-binding ritual and how thousands of psychers each day surrender their life forces entirely, sustaining the master of mankind and the Astronomicon. 10,000, moreover, guard the deepest dungeons of the palace, where relics of the dark age of technology lurk, capable of driving a man insane. Shield companies of the Custodians regularly leave hallowed Terra to inspect the defences of the Sol system or annihilate any, even the smallest threat to the sovereignty of the throne world. Additionally, the Praetorians periodically conduct bloody games, during which one of the warriors, assuming the role of an intruder or assassin, tests the palace complex's defences for weaknesses and thereby assists in further fortifying them. For millennia, the Golden Sentinels have carried out monotonous service, bound by traditions which have turned into routine rituals. Though the rest of the Imperium succumbed to stagnation, and the subjects of the Emperor over the centuries began to view the Custodians with a blend of reverent awe and superstitious worship, they unfailingly dismissed doubt and apathy, never for a moment succumbing to despair. The Praetorians hardly notice the ordinary mortals who bustle below their feet, and invariably keep even the most devout space marines at spear's length, for one who betrays once may fail again. Indeed, the Adeptus Custodes apply this mantra to themselves, thus never allowing even a moment's inattention or hesitation. Through the ages, their Captain General has held the title of one of the High Lords of Terror, or served as their advisor, wielding immense influence in the process. Regardless, the Emperor's bodyguards continue to exercise all the powers granted to them in the Magisterium Lex Ultima. To this day, they manage Terra's defense as they see fit, accountable in matters of physical and spiritual security, and steadfastness only to their silent lord. The Companions is the name given to the cohort of 300 custodians that protect the Emperor seated upon the Golden Throne. For such service, they are personally selected by the Captain General, who meticulously assesses candidates based on their training and combat achievements, as well as their insight, strength of spirit, and numerous other factors. In the entire Imperium, there is no task more important than the protection of mankind's sovereign. Hence, in determining the makeup of the Companions, neither rank nor veteran status of the Praetorians is considered, and warriors who are surpassed in this selection by younger or less experienced comrades do not feel insulted. The vigilance of the bodyguards is unending, though they are, of course, sometimes relieved for brief respite, yet the service remains infernally grueling. Formed in ranks around the Golden Throne, the guards spend unimaginably long periods of time. They stand motionless and silent, yet can come to full combat readiness at the slightest sign of danger. Such strain is mentally and spiritually exhausting even for demigods among the 10,000. Therefore, if the Captain General deems it time for one of them to leave the ranks of the Companions, his decision is immediately carried out, and a fresh recruit takes the indicated warrior's place. Again, this is no dishonor for a custodian, but merely a pragmatic acknowledgement that even heroes cannot indefinitely perform such an exhausting task. The longest vigil was maintained by Astron Kalos, who did not relinquish his place in the silent formation for an entire century. Praetorians who have performed such service usually then join the ranks of the austere bodyguards known as the Aquilan Shields. They protect the most high-ranking citizens of the Imperium, primarily the High Lords of Terra. From the Master of the Navigators Guild to the High Logisticar of the Adeptus Administratum, the Lord Militant of the Imperium to the Shadowed Master of the Officio Assassinorum, the Companions have acted as guardians for them all. All the warriors of the 10,000 believe that fulfilling such duties is implied by their oath to the Master of Mankind, for in essence they guard those who are necessary for the successful governance of his domains. Nevertheless, it is precisely due to this role of the Custodes that the aristocratic elite of Terra holds them in special esteem. With the help of a handful of Custodes, the Emperor crushed the willful despots of the Age of Strife and brought Terra under his dominion. With just a couple of hundred bodyguards, he secured his success and quelled the rebellion of the Thunder Warriors. Now we number 10,000, and we stand ready to strike across the galaxy. 10,000. Do you think, whelp, that your treacherous brothers stand a chance against us? If Space Marines can, with all fairness, be considered the sons of Primarchs, then the Adeptus Custodes are the progeny of the Master of Mankind himself. His power permeates the bodies of the Praetorians, and his blessings are so potent that they shield the warriors from enemy attacks, both real and ethereal. The supreme magnificence of the Master of Mankind courses through the veins of the Golden Guardians, blazes in their eyes, and seemingly charges the air around them. So all soldiers loyal to him instinctively respect and fear these demigods of war. Only the trusted servants of the Imperial Palace know the method of creating such extraordinary warriors, and it is carried out by the most skilled chirurgeons and biochemists of Terra, who work in magnificent laboratories hidden from the rest of humanity. Since the Custodes fight solely for the Emperor himself, answer only to him, and are not subordinate to anyone else, the methods of replenishing their ranks are not disclosed, and even the High Lords of Terra cannot obtain this information. It is known that every Praetorian was once an ordinary infant born in one of the noble houses of the throne world. To commit one's child to the most glorious service in the Imperium is an unthinkable honor, and many prominent clans of Terran aristocrats have willingly given up nearly all their newborns to gain it. The genetic transformation of candidates begins while they're still in their early childhood. The earlier the creation of an Adeptus Custodes warrior begins, the higher the chances of success. During such selections, massive crowds gather on the Avenue of Sacrifice behind the Ascensor's Gate. Spectators fervently pray and enthusiastically cheer the worthy representatives of Terra's high society who march past, relishing the adoration of the masses. and at the end of the path, they permanently entrust their heirs to the Emperor's care. There is a reason why the numbers of the Adeptus Custodes, despite their impressive lifespan, have never exceeded approximately 10,000. Simply put, for every worthy candidate who becomes a guardian of the Golden Throne, there are many hundreds who meet failure. Space Marines are created through the implantation of gene seed and additional organs, transforming them into living weapons. But in the case of the Custodians, things are different. It is unknown what mysterious bioalchemy triggers their metamorphoses, but they occur at a much deeper level in the cells of the candidate and, possibly, even in their soul. The elevation of candidates takes place not only on the physical and spiritual planes. Future members of the Custodes undergo rigorous mental preparation. Their minds are reshaped from scratch, and the very structure of their consciousness is fortified, like the walls of the Emperor's palace after Horus's betrayal, until the candidate's mind becomes an impregnable fortress, or collapses under its own weight. All recruits undergo sessions of mnemonic conditioning and psychological enhancement. In total, this process involves thousands of hours and is marked by merciless efficiency. Information is literally hammered into the candidates' minds like engraving into metal, so swiftly and harshly that many of them go insane. A custodian must not only master all aspects of military science, including the methods of assassins, counterintelligence techniques, threat recognition rules, and any means of eliminating opponents known to humanity, but also acquire knowledge in other disciplines that ordinary bodyguards do not require. Praetorians are obliged to meticulously study diplomacy and the principles of state governance, stellar navigation, space geography, history, philosophy, theosophy, art, and numerous other subjects. This educational approach has persisted since the era when the Golden Guardians not only protected the Emperor, but also served as his advisors and wise interlocutors. Currently, candidates are trained more out of tradition, adhering to formalities, but such preparation has obvious advantages. Due to this flood of information, not only are recruits with insufficiently strong minds weeded out, but this custom also ensures that the Adeptus Custodes remain enlightened individuals with a broad world view. Such enlightenment was considered commonplace during the Great Crusade, but has become a rare exception in the current era of fear and ignorance. The Custodians' knowledge is their privilege, highlighting the degree of degradation of the rest of the Imperium. To the credit of the Golden Guardians, they do not fall into despair because of this. For the Custodians, there are no forbidden knowledge. As to perform their duty best, they must be fully informed about the terrible dark forces striving to seize the galaxy. Furthermore, by revealing truths that could unhinge mortals, the mentors quickly determine who among the newcomers is insufficiently strong in spirit. Any recruit who passes such a trial not only firmly understands the profound meaning and consequences of the war for the Emperor's mastery, but also comprehends why no one outside the circle of the 10,000 should learn of such things. No one dwelling beyond the walls of the Emperor's palace knows how lengthy the process of creating a custodian truly is. One way or another, those who survive become majestic Praetorians, whose bodies and minds are entirely transformed. Nothing remains of their former selves, and thus new members of the Brotherhood adopt names drawn from the legends of heroes, monsters, and gods of ancient terror. This tradition perfectly aligns with the Custodians' superhuman nature and allows the aristocratic families of the throne world to avoid humiliation. Each clan can claim that it was their offspring who had the valor to become the Emperor's bodyguard, and no one can refute them. Noble houses indeed do so. Though the Custodians' minds are shielded from the pernicious influence of sorcerers and psychers, they possess no warp abilities themselves. The Master of Mankind could not allow even the slightest weakness in the mental defense of his Praetorians, for battle psychers are a powerful yet unreliable weapon. Their minds could be subjugated by the denizens of the warp, but such a risk does not exist for the Adeptus Custodes. The worthiest candidates, those who survive the trials and join the Golden Legion, immediately earn the respect of their new comrades. Among the Emperor's bodyguards, there are no seniors or juniors, only flawless warriors who understand the heavy responsibility that comes with their power and authority. The valorous deeds of a custodian are reflected in the length of his name. Initially, it always contains only one epithet, but with each feat accomplished by the Praetorian, his name gains a new component. In the distant past, this naming was done by the emperor himself. Now, however, the achievements of the brothers are marked by the Captain General, or in some cases, the shield captain on the battlefield. Golden sentinels who have served for centuries typically possess dozens of names inscribed on the inside of their plates and sometimes etched in microscopic letters on their bones. Along with their new name, a newcomer to the Adeptus Custodes receives personal equipment. Entire dynasties of exceptionally skilled craftsmen assigned the task of crafting auramite armor and impeccably balanced weaponry for each of the 10,000 reside in the gilded towers on Terra. Particularly renowned for their martial equipment masterpieces are clans such as Halbrinmere and Gestaxtis. Their augmented baron artisans create true works of martial art. Furthermore, the custodians have access to an extensive arsenal of technological means, many created millennia ago. All varieties of the Golden Legion's war machines and equipment are truly perfect. Their outstanding quality, proven on battlefields, is embodied in the sleek gravitic Praetor's Virtus Dawn Eagle, in the unsurpassed Alaris pattern Terminator armor, as well as in the Land Raiders and Contemptor dreadnoughts, which fought as far back as the times of the Great Crusade. The weapons of war with which the bodyguards of the Master of Mankind are equipped never fail nor falter, for they are handcrafted by the most gifted artisans of the Imperium, and their equipment is maintained according to the strictest standards. For the defenders of the Golden Throne, as well as their military gear, weaknesses or vulnerabilities are impermissible. Considering the Custodians' incredible gear, endless training regimens, years of holographic campaigns, and the shadowy conflicts in which the Praetorians fight in the name of the Emperor throughout the Sol system and far beyond, it is no surprise that 10,000 represent the best military organization in the Imperium. In fact, the Adeptus Custodes are immortal, but even they eventually weaken. Some are injured, rendering the guards unable to fulfill their duty, as warriors with lost limbs, artificial eyes, or augmetic organs are physically no longer perfect. Others notice that their mental capabilities decline, albeit slightly, yet still sufficiently to impact reaction speed, memory, or attentiveness. For most Imperial fighters, a decrease in attack or parry speed by 1/10 of a second is practically insignificant. However, for the Praetorians, such a shortcoming signifies that their watch has concluded. When a custodian decides they are no longer fit for service, they leave all their gear in the armory, don a black robe with a hood, and vanish into the vast void of the galaxy. Such noble exiles, however, continue to protect the Emperor of Mankind, wandering and observing. Some work alone, prowling as grim and foreboding shadows through the Emperor's domain's dark corners. Conversely, some organize networks of informers and agents using fear and intimidation to achieve compliance where loyalty and honor are insufficient. Upon discovering a potential threat to Terra and the Master of Mankind, these guards send a warning to the Captain General through secret communication channels. Forewarned of danger by the Emperor's eyes, the Adeptus Custodes effectively conduct punitive operations across the galaxy, often eradicating the threat at its inception. The Imperial Palace on the Throne World is the largest and most impregnable defensive complex in the Imperium. Encompassing an entire mountain range, it spans thousands of kilometers across Terra's surface. The Adeptus Custodes are responsible for the safety of this colossal fortress, fulfilling their duty with tireless diligence. Even during the era of the Great Crusade, the palace was an unprecedented marvel of engineering. The subsequent years brought irreversible changes. Initially, they had to sacrifice its beautiful architecture so the complex could withstand the siege of Horus's army, and the battle itself with the treacherous hordes of the War Master resulted in massive destruction. After the conclusion of the heresy, the halls of the Emperor were essentially rebuilt anew, now as the greatest fortress in human history. Over the last 10 millennia, it has continuously expanded both horizontally and vertically, gradually sinking into squalor. The once austere outlines of the palace are now buried under layers of Gothic embellishments and creations of the crude monumental style of the cult imperialis. What was once a light, magnificent structure has transformed into a hunched colossus, an awkward specimen of menacing architecture that flaunts its military might as if challenging nightmares from the dark void. Perhaps its fate is the most vivid metaphor for what has happened to the entire Imperium. But although the palace has become an ornate mockery of its former self, the custodians still guard it reliably, and this is quite a difficult task. The perimeter of the palace's outer walls stretches for thousands of kilometers. The gigantic spires of the residential macro-complexes and spaceports pierce the upper layers of the atmosphere and extend into the void like the spikes of some creature with a glowing hide. The sublevels delve deep into the sacred crust of terror, descending in some places for hundreds of miles. There are no records in the archives listing all the endless halls, corridors, vaults, bastions and squares of the palace. Behind its curtains dwell national communities, territorial clans, and techno-urbanistic tribes of servitors, enough to populate several planetary systems. Nonetheless, the Adeptus Custodes ensure the security of the entire complex. It is they who patrol the colossal, seemingly endless walls, stand guard at arsenals and sanctuaries, and protect the routes of petitioners, the famous spaceports, and the gigantic fortifications. The Praetorians inspect the orbital guns and orbital installations, whose batteries span many kilometers, and vigilantly guard the crypts deep within the palace, where secrets so dreadful are hidden that their unveiling would lead to the extinction of humanity. Yet the Golden Legion has enough warriors and resolve to manage these and many other tasks. For millennia, the shield-bearing forces of the Custodes, assembling discreetly aboard requisitioned starships, have departed to exterminate threats detected by the Emperor's eyes prowling in the void. Additionally, squads of Praetorians regularly patrol the Sol system, relieving their comrades in the garrisons of military bases orbiting the Moon, Venus, Pluto, and the numerous stellar citadels in deep space that guard the approaches to Terra. It is also known that the Adeptus Custodes have long-standing ties with the chapter of the Imperial Fists. These Astartes still assist the Golden Guardians in safeguarding the approaches to the system. Their giant star fortress, the Phalanx, has often taken up a protective orbit above the throne world. For decades upon centuries, the Custodians have unswervingly fulfilled their duty. Now, as darkness engulfs the galaxy around them and they are forced to fight in ever new wars, the Praetorians defend the Imperial Palace and all of Terra with an unprecedented determination. In the mere days before the long-foreseen storm erupted and the great rift cleaved the galaxy in twain, a bright light of hope flickered in the realm of Ultramar. Thanks to a great sacrifice and supernatural forces, Robert Guilliman, the Ultramarine's Primarch on the brink of death, was revived. His return brought about monumental changes. When the traitor legions besieged the Imperial Palace in the decisive battle of the Horus Heresy, Primarch Guilliman, with his Ultramarines, was too far from Terra to come to his father's aid. It is probable that the fate of the galaxy would have unfolded differently had he been present in that battle. Nonetheless, the resurrected Robert resolutely decided to never again make such a mistake. Seeing the dark threats looming over the entire Imperium, he took a desperate decision to embark on a crusade that led him through the stars by previously unseen bloody paths to the throne world itself. There, Guilliman was received with honor, and Aquila Commander Kalim Varanor granted him an audience with the Emperor, after which the Council of High Lords of Terra reinstated Robert to the position of Lord Commander of the Imperium. Although the returned Primarch outwardly maintained a stern majesty, deep within he was shaken by the state of his father's domains. To repel the onslaught of chaotic hordes, Guilliman immediately began reforms, without hesitation dismissing the stubbornness and ossified literalism of the Adeptus Terra bureaucrats. The Primarch resurrected at a time none too soon, for soon after his endeavours began, the avalanche of fury unleashed by the Great Rift descended upon the Sol system. Although the throne world itself did not fall under the warp-spawned storms, it was enveloped by the shockwaves of imperial disruptions, temporarily severing the Astronomicon's beacon. All of Terra, from the highest spires to the deepest dungeons, was consumed by turmoil and despair. The Golden Legion had to quell riots, suppress the uprising of doomsday prophets and their cults, and exterminate frenzied mobs of desperate supplicants driven to madness. The Custodian guard squads fought relentlessly in the dark catacombs beneath the palace, where ancient horrors broke free from their chambers after the rune wards burned out. But the worst was yet to come. Aiming to deliver an ultimate blow to the Imperium that would shatter the entire state, massive hordes of Khorne's demons breached the veil of reality and assaulted the Lion's Gate. Hordes of howling creatures surged toward the palace like a crimson tide, and a fierce battle ensued. The gun batteries flanking the Lion's Gate, as large as battleships, were carving blazing craters into the ranks of the devilish army. Yet they could not win the battle by themselves. Then the combined army of the Adeptus, Custodes, Ultramarines and Sisters of Silence, led by Roboute Guilliman and Captain General Valoris, marched forth to battle the demons. They met the enemy at the walls of the Imperial Palace. The scenes of battle were reminiscent of the horrors of the Siege of Terra a century before, and once again the Praetorians crossed blades with the frenzied butchers of the Blood God. However, now the Custodians were led by some of the greatest heroes of the Imperium, fiercely determined not to repeat the old failure, and thus they prevailed. The assault was commanded by 8 bloodthirsters, but the warriors of the Master of Mankind cut them down or blew them apart one by one. The Golden Guardians also suffered enormous losses. Many noble defenders of the Emperor, who had protected him for millennia, fell under the blows of bronze axes, the hated spawn of Khorne. And yet, even though the skies themselves churned with blood-red clouds pouring scarlet rain upon the earth, the legions of the God of Anger gradually faded from existence, howling with rage and frustration. After the assault on the Lion's Gate, a grim truth became evident. Although the Inquisition arrested and executed a great many witnesses to the battle and endeavoured to destroy all traces of it, the leaders of the Adeptus Custodes officially acknowledged that they could no longer guarantee Terra's safety without adopting special preventive measures. If the servants of the Dark Gods breached the defence of humanity's cradle once, they could do so again. Therefore, Valoris and Guilliman, meeting behind closed doors, protected by intricate wards and layers of psi protections, discussed amendments to the status of the Adeptus Custodes. Naturally, they were not relieved of guarding the palace, and their comrades remained vigilant within the Emperor's throne room. However, as logically inferred from the oaths given by the Praetorians, they agreed to expand their sphere of responsibilities far beyond the bounds of the solar system. Since then, more shield hosts ventured on campaigns from Terra, guided by alpha-level astropathic interceptions, the prophecies of oracles, as well as reports from the Emperor's eyes, which continued their mission. The purpose of these groups was to eradicate the most dangerous threats to the existence of the Master of Mankind. In executing their missions, they travelled throughout the galaxy, even into the darkness of the Imperium Nihilus, beyond the great rift stretching across the cosmos. Yet they invariably cared for the sanctity of the throne world. To this end, several shield companies accompanied the Indomitus Crusade, assisting Guilliman as emissaries of the Emperor. They delivered reinforcements of Primaris Astartes and the technology for their creation to the beleaguered Space Marine chapters. Through their presence, the Custodians made it known that a gift had arrived from the Master of Mankind himself, and rejecting such an offering or neglecting it was unacceptable. Other shield companies became a permanent garrison at defensive outposts on the outer edges of the Sol system. Still, others ventured even further to safeguard key warp routes to Terra that yet retained stability. Some of the Custodians have been assigned special tasks and are now hunting arch-heretics, seeking artifacts necessary for the survival of the Imperium, or fighting a covert war against humanity's hidden enemies with doubled efforts. Never since the time of the Great Crusade have so many Custodians been deployed beyond Terra. Part 2. Organization of the Custodes. To an outsider, the structure of the 10,000 appears convoluted. To other imperial authorities, to whom the Golden Legion sometimes takes the trouble to report, its hierarchy seems excessively complicated and overly rigid. This is partially due to tradition, partially due to secrecy. In truth, the Adeptus Custodes are formed according to a reliable and tactically flexible scheme. The Emperor's Guardians, as a military formation, represent an army of unmatched warriors, each of whom stands above the representatives of any other organization in the human state. No agent of the Imperium has the right to command a custodian. Even such high-ranking individuals as members of the Council of Terror and Lord Commander Guilliman can only request assistance from the Praetorians, but not demand it. As befits a brotherhood of elite warriors, the internal hierarchy of the Adeptus Custodes is extremely transparent. They are led by a Captain General. This post has been passed from one valiant commander to another throughout millennia since the mysterious disappearance of Constantine Valdor. Such a leader possesses full authority over the Golden Guardians, acts as the ceremonial deputy of the Emperor himself, and speaks on behalf of the Master of Mankind. One level below is the Custodian Tribune, a group of 10 veterans of the Golden Legion who serve as advisors to the Captain General. The composition of this structure regularly changes to ensure a mix of wisdom, experience, and fresh ideas. A member of the Tribune can only be a Praetorian who has been honored with at least 10 names and has led his brothers to victory in battle at least 3 times. The minimum term of service in this organization is 10 years, and a warrior spends them away from the front line as he directs all the resources of his mighty mind to support the Captain General in matters of strategy and diplomacy. On the next tier after the ruling council are the Shield Captains, gifted commanders leading other warriors with unwavering heroism. The various titles of these officers, from Supreme Castellans and Aquila Commanders to Master Guardians, are often determined by specific duties. It is the Shield Captains who lead the Custodians during combat operations. Typically, one of them takes overall command of the operation, while several others support their colleague with their skills and knowledge. All other Praetorians are essentially equal among themselves and are divided into informal groups called sodalities. When selecting a particular brotherhood, the custodian is guided by the strategic function assigned to him within the 10,000. Yet, whether the custodian fights among the ranks of the Virtus Praetors on speedy gravitic jet bikes, in the heavy assault contingents of the Alarus, or alongside the steadfast wardens, his fellow brothers in arms bestow upon him precisely the honors they deem appropriate for his merits. The Golden Legion distinguishes itself from the vast majority of other military organizations within the Imperium by lacking a strict organizational hierarchy in its armies. To fulfill the tasks at hand, the commanders of custodian formations have the discretion to choose virtually any warriors and equipment, following only the most general requirements for unit formation. An individual force of the Adeptus Custodes is referred to as a shield company. The size of such a unit can vary as the shield captain selects warriors based on the specific task. He can assemble anything from a handful of Praetorians to a formidable army bolstered by gravitic jet bikes, tanks and dreadnoughts. Under normal conditions, a shield company consists of 40 custodians led by one shield captain. If a larger formation is needed, several such units combine into a shield host. This formation, consisting of dozens or even hundreds of Golden Guardians under the command of shield captain conclaves, wields sufficient might to crush any enemy army and conquer an entire star system. Such a powerful force is mobilized only in exceptional circumstances, when no other armed organization of the Imperium can be entrusted with the operation, and then the host goes to battle to fulfill the will of the Master of Mankind with unwavering determination. Typically, several shield captains command a shield host, advised by the wise counsel of a Vexillus Praetor, while a single shield captain still leads each company, though in some cases he is aided by a few particularly distinguished warriors. The supporting forces and resources attached to a shield company are referred to as the Imperatus Auxilia. These include armored vehicles, dreadnoughts, temporarily assigned warships, and even non-combatant field agents. All auxiliary forces and resources assigned to the shield host, serving its constituent shield companies, constitute what is termed Maximus Auxilia. However, in practice, they still fight alongside their parent shield companies. As an example of a shield host, one can cite the Solar Furies, first assembled in the late 36th millennium for a battle against Necrons that awakened on a planet perilously close to Terra. Since then, units of this host have fought together numerous times, typically gathered to counter threats that unexpectedly emerged near or within the Sol system. It is important to note that the Solar Furies are an exceptionally large formation. Typically, a shield host refers to any assembly that includes 2 or more shield companies under the direction of several shield captains. In the depths of the palace, incarnate nightmares and supernatural terrors from the depths of the old night are imprisoned, creatures capable of erasing the Imperium without a trace. The duty of the shield host of the Shadow Keepers is to guard them until the end of time. These custodians are entrusted with the keys to the sigil-sealed gates hidden within the dungeons of the Imperial Palace. Only the Shadow Keepers know how to unlock the runic locks, dismantle the wards, and traverse the sacred circles. And only they are aware that such actions must never be permitted, for the dungeons contain something so monstrous that if it escaped, it would threaten all of humanity with madness. The burdensome watch is entrusted to a complete shield host. More than 100 Praetorians patrol the unlit, silent corridors, vigilantly guarding the dreadful legacy of the Age of Strife. Most mortals would lose their sanity performing such a task. Though no sound emerges from the forbidden cells, and nothing is visible behind the doors, the very air in those passages is saturated with an atmosphere of dread, and from the constant presence of evil, shadows thicken and crawl across the walls. In those grim stone enclaves, even the superhuman warriors of the Adeptus Custodes feel uneasy, for they are never free from a sense of inexplicable threat. The fact that the Shadow Keepers perform their duty flawlessly, sometimes remaining on duty for decades without relievers, speaks volumes about their discipline and spiritual resilience. This shield host includes many custodian wardens, for their oaths of protection help the fighters focus on their singular task, forgetting all else. The commanders of these ominous sentinels are equipped with ancient weapons of mysterious origin which are permissible to use as a last resort if anything escapes from the dungeons. For 10,000 years, the Shadow Keepers have fulfilled their duty successfully, but with the emergence of the Great Rift, everything changed. When the raw energy of chaos surged among the stars, unprecedented abominations from the past broke into the light. Worse still, some cells suddenly emptied as some unclean power abducted the artifacts and entities contained within, and now they once again torment the galaxy. Fearing what might happen if the formidable relics of the Age of Strife fall into the wrong hands, the detachments of the shield host finally ventured beyond Terra. These custodians must seize what does not belong in the Imperium, annihilate anyone who stands in their path, and return the foul trophies to the cells where they belong. Over the past centuries, many shield captains have been appointed as commanders of the Shadow Keepers. With the position comes the title of Jailer, which remains with the custodian forever, and earns him the deep respect of all his brethren. Such a warrior must be the most vigilant of guards, the most watchful and alert warden on Terra. Moreover, should any creature or relic vanish from the dungeons, or should a new threat arise that requires confinement within the palace's dungeons, duty will compel the jailer to personally lead the initiative. Currently, this position is held by Shield Captain Borsa Thirsk, who has served in this role for a century and a half. He is a stern and fearsome warrior of devout intent, utterly fearless, unyielding, and ever vigilant. An ideal jailer. Prior to the outburst of the galaxy-wide storm, Thirsk had only twice left Terra. However, following the opening of the Great Rift, he is seldom on the planet, which speaks volumes about the catastrophic situation in the Imperium. Custodian Warden Jehal Feldorus Gao is one of the Shadow Keepers, unbending warriors with stern eyes. The mournful hue of his armor is reminiscent of the dungeon's gloom, while the rich crimson shade of his left shoulder pad and adornment indicate his membership in the shield host. Praetorian Gao has guarded the secret dungeons for 17 years, during which he left Terra thrice to undertake especially covert missions to retrieve the lost. It was Jehal's blade that felled the slithering dreamer on Tarnus IV, and that joyless triumph is immortalized in new names carved on the inner side of the Guardian's armor. In the performance of our duty to protect the Emperor, we are not confined by the walls of his palace. Our war resembles an eternal game of regicide, concurrently played on countless boards against an endless multitude of opponents. In such a contest, one must constantly exhibit ingenuity, act preemptively, and seize the initiative whenever the chance arises. We must see as far ahead as possible and execute any move flawlessly. The slightest error will lead to ultimate defeat. When the harbingers of doom in the palace study the flow of the immaterium, searching for signs of forthcoming calamities, they also identify individuals who, by personal example, thought or deed, could prevent disaster before the Golden Throne itself is threatened. These fateful individuals are accorded special honor. They are taken under the protection of the Aquilan shields. Thus, a small contingent of custodians ensures the survival of a military or spiritual leader, aiding in the Emperor's protection. The Aquilan shields are an unofficial brotherhood composed of warriors from various branches of the 10,000. Typically, the bodyguards gather in small groups and, upon traversing the Star Ocean, reach their wards wherever they may be. The custodians do not send notifications or request permissions. Appearing as if from nowhere, these embodiments of the Emperor's will declare that henceforth a certain individual is under the aegis of the sovereign of mankind. It is an honor that cannot be declined by the one chosen, regardless of their life circumstances. The guardians of this shield host have protected members of the Council of Terror, the Adeptus Sororitas, Lords Inquisitors, Astra Militarum commanders, and Space Marine captains. They even defended 2 Crusade leaders who held the title of War Master, with the Aquilan shields demonstrating restraint, disregarding historical associations with the one who first bore that title. Yet the custodians would also materialize in flashes of golden light at the front lines, shielding with their blades the eloquent preachers, militia commanders who stood frozen in awe, and others seemingly insignificant figures. What unites them is only one thing. It is expected that under the vigilant gaze of the Emperor's own bodyguards, these individuals will achieve incredible feats in defending the throne world. The Praetorians fight for them so that the foretold future may come to pass, and they will save their charges from any threat until their potential is exhausted. At that point, the custodians depart without a word, leaving the chosen to fend for themselves. Often this ends poorly, but the Aquilan shields are no longer concerned by such matters unless the safety of the Golden Throne is threatened. Tauromachus Ossian is a custodian warden who has fought among the Aquilan shields for more than 4 centuries. His affiliation is signified by the regal purple of his left shoulder guard and attire. Throughout his service in this brotherhood, Ossian saved Arch-Cardinal Mumbres from demonic assassins. He guarded the High Lord of Terra Vend during the Red Razor uprisings, and also shielded from the horrors of war a young preacher named Lorin, who was astonished by such honors. In the end, the selfless youth performed a martyrdom act and ascended to sainthood, which changed the course of the campaign across the entire sector. The Dread Host represents an astoundingly mighty army. It comprises hundreds of custodians distributed among numerous shield hosts which travel on the Moirades, 3 warships constructed before the heresy. The task of this army is simple: to deal with the enemies of the Emperor, embodying his wrath and justice. This formation does not employ swift pinpoint strikes, does not engage in clandestine warfare or systematic defenses. Instead, the shield captains of the Dread Host in their councils determine the most apparent and serious threats to the Segmentum Solar, after which they eradicate enemies with such ruthlessness that the echoes of fierce battles reverberate even through the warp. Sometimes a single starship is deployed to the target, at other times 2. Since the founding of the Imperium, only a handful of times have all 3 Moirades been dispatched against a foe. In any case, the outcome of the battles is always the same. The Golden Guardians, with dozens of Alaris custodians in the vanguard, crush their adversaries with overwhelming attacks. They cut down enemy soldiers and tear apart their war machines. They topple false idols and commit them to the flames. They destroy defiant cities, raze enemy fortresses, and annihilate their allies and followers. They serve as terrifying examples of what happens to those who dared challenge the Emperor's dominion. They pay no heed to attempts at surrender and do not allow anyone to escape. And when the dread host ends a war, nothing remains of the victims except terrifying tales of the ruthless execution wrought by the hand of the Emperor of mankind. They devastated Orc war and rebellion-engulfed star systems, crushing traitorous crusades. They faced enemies outnumbering them thousands of times and triumphed through superior tactical brilliance, speed and style. In every campaign, this host demonstrates how dreadful the Emperor's wrath is. Merciless bloodshed, total annihilation. These are the lessons they use to quash even the thought of possible rebellion or invasion. The fortress housing the dread host towers over the entire district of the palace. This fortified bastion is illuminated by enormous electric chalice lamps and arc lumens, positioned to shine upon 500 colossal eagle statues perched on the upper parapet walls. Due to their poses, the sinister statues, the size of super-heavy tanks, appear to vigilantly observe the world. Many of the birds gaze upwards at the starry ocean, while others look down at the crowded ceremonial avenues. Many superstitious people believe that the eagles atop the sanctum of 1,000 eyes can perceive treachery wherever it lurks, and that through the statue's eye sockets the Emperor himself watches, seeking darkness in human hearts. In some sense, this is true. Inside each statue is a complex of long-range augers, servitor agitator modules, and multiband listening devices transmitting data streams to the Citadel's data chapels. Using this information, the dread host identifies the Golden Throne's dangerous enemies, destined for annihilation. Custodian Guard Calisarian Tristrain Desh has served in the dread host for only 6 months, yet within this time he has participated in 2 different theatres of war deemed a step away from terror on a galactic scale. During the Purge of Cormium, the Praetorian mercilessly slaughtered nearly 2,500 renegade guardsmen. At the battle for the Corvinium mines on Triton, he impaled the patriarch of the Gin Stealers, ending the life of the foul cult's master in a fountain of hissing ichor. Desh proudly wears the mourning black pauldron and white terriges, symbols of his shield company, one currently composing the Dread Host. Among the star-spanning domains of humanity, the Sol system stands as one of the most fortified. For the Adeptus Custodes, its planets, spaceports and transit routes are extensions of their master's palace, thus requiring vigilant protection. In humanity's native star system lie hundreds of military bases, from the massive orbital fortresses of Luna to Jupiter's cloud-piercing strongholds and the deep space battle stations in the Halo Belt. Billions of guns threateningly peer into the dark expanse of the galaxy, prepared to annihilate anyone who dares encroach upon the locus of the Imperium's power. Above every interplanetary route loom armoured towers and bastions adorned with gargoyles, warded against the unholy machinations of the many enemies of mankind's overlord. Entire armadas of the Imperial Navy patrol these paths, seeking out the slightest hint of danger. Yet for terror, perhaps no line of outer defence is more reliable than the custodians of the Solar Watch. The warriors of this formation, consisting of several shield companies of varying size, are bound by oath to guard the distant bastions of the throne world's defences. These Praetorians consider themselves the first true line of the palace's fortifications. It is their sworn duty to prevent any external threat from reaching terror, and thus they incessantly patrol the routes between the void structures and planets within the Sol system, never for a moment letting their vigilance waver. While the Solar Watch primarily travels aboard Navy vessels and interstellar trade ships, it boasts an impressive fleet of venerable land raiders and largely employs mechanized formations. This allows the Praetorians to respond swiftly in potentially dangerous situations and to crush adversaries through overwhelming force. Serious threats to the Sol biosphere are rare, yet they do arise. Thus, the Custodians have played a key role in eradicating cults of demon worshippers, thwarting inquisitorial coups and combating insidious Xenos infiltrations on every planet except Mars. Formerly the powers of the Golden Guardians, extend to the strongholds of the tech priests as well. But the Adeptus Custodes are wise enough not to sour relations with the servants of the Omnissiah. They visit Mars only infrequently, trusting the adepts of the Mechanicus to handle their local malefactors. The Captain Generals, who favour active defence, occasionally task the Solar Watch with conducting so-called Talon raids, assembling forces in the strength of shield companies for these sorties to strike the most dangerous foes in the star systems closest to Terra. The Solar Watch does not expend resources on attacks in combat zones, where significant Imperial forces are already present. These custodians prefer to eliminate threats in their infancy, or to annihilate enemies that have breached other lines of humanity's defences. Stationed within venerable land raiders, the Praetorians crash into the enemy with primitive armoured wedges. The Golden Guardians prioritise the destruction of enemy commanders and the most powerful creatures or machinery. When the enemy army is stripped of its capability to conduct hostilities, the Solar Watch makes a sudden withdrawal, leaving the final mopping up to the ordinary forces of the Imperium. It is no surprise the task of safeguarding the Sol system is vitally important, and the custodians cannot leave their posts for extended periods. Pedanoris Caligus fights for the Solar Watch and bears the heraldic colours of the formation, marble, white and red. He is the oldest and most respected warrior of his detachment, consistently aiding his comrades with confident and flawless advice. The veteran ensures that his allies do not miss a single detail or advantage in battle, nor allow the enemy even a moment's respite. Caligus and his detachment's warriors boarded large tonnage barges, secretly transporting cultists, and subjected the garrisons of orbital platforms that showed negligence in duty to decimation. During the expedition to Iorlos under Shield Captain Thetis's command, it was these custodians who annihilated the cabal of flesh-manipulating witches, preventing the Xenos from committing atrocities against the Golden Throne. The Emperor of Mankind has long been bound to the Golden Throne, but some warriors of the 10,000 claim they hear their master's voice during meditation or feel his guiding hand. However, other custodians do not consider such occurrences divine intervention, as they have never worshipped the Emperor as a god. The custodians believe they are touched by the indomitable will of the Master of Mankind, who resides in a maimed body, still giving instructions to his bodyguards as he did in the times when he fought alongside them. Praetorians who feel this bond with the Emperor of Mankind most acutely become emissaries imperatus. By coming together, they engage in discussions and deep contemplation to interpret their master's possible wishes. With the tacit approval of the Captain General, these guards bring messages from the Master of Mankind to Imperial commanders, or in some cases retrieve some ancient device from the palace vaults, then present it to the champion of humanity who would best use the relic. Messages from the custodians have altered the routes of entire crusades. Thanks to them, the Emperor's servants have eliminated threats or found hordes of archaeotech that would otherwise have eluded human attention. Emissaries imperatus have been seen beyond Terra for millennia, albeit rarely and in small numbers. Now, however, following the return of Guilliman and the commencement of the Indomitus Crusade, these Praetorians have become notably more active. When the Primarch announced his intention to grant the secrets of creating Primaris Astartes to the loyal Space Marine chapters, his plan met some resistance from the Adeptus Custodes, who feared the over-empowerment of those who once rose against the Emperor and could rebel again. But dozens of messengers of the throne intervened in the debate, declaring this the will of the Emperor of Mankind. They embarked on the crusade alongside Guilliman, and many chose the role of Virtus Praetors, mounting jet bikes to swiftly deliver news of reinforcements to besieged chapters. Furthermore, the presence of the custodians alone compelled even the most orthodox orders to accept Primaris warriors into their ranks. No one would dare reject a gift extended by the hand of the Master of Mankind. Archimalus Tychor became an emissary imperatus over a millennium ago. He fights as part of the custodian warden squad known as the Veritas Proclamation, proudly wearing the red shoulder guard and grey-white robes of his shield company. It was Tycho's hints bestowed upon him by the Emperor that guided the sacred Adeptus Mechanicus Explorator, Crusade Gamma Hades, to the archaeotech treasures of Heng's world. It was Archimalis's blade that felled dozens of massive orcs, who were the first to reach the techno-riches of that planet. Veritas' proclamation returned to Terra just shortly before the Great Rift was unveiled, and the warriors of the division were among the first to voice support for the Indomitus Crusade. These warriors are crafted by the art of the Martian priesthood, and now they are bestowed upon you by the will of the all-powerful Emperor. Enough questions. Rejoice in the honor that has befallen you today. The immortal master of mankind himself grants you the gift of hope, and you will accept it with sincere gratitude and reverence. Otherwise you shall become traitors just like those you fight against. Once, a full-scale invasion of Terra was deemed utterly unthinkable. After the emergence of the Great Rift, that era has gone into the past. Currently, the Sol system boasts some of the most reliable fortifications in the galaxy, where garrisons of resolute warriors stand under the aegis of technology and faith. Yet the defense of the throne world primarily relies on the Adeptus Custodes. Should any bold or reckless invader approach the boundaries of the Sol system, their fleet will be attacked even before crossing the Mandeville Point. There, within the asteroid belt, Colossus space forts anchor on Imperial anchors, manned by specialized regiments of the Astra Militarum. Other outer regions of the system are blocked by 1,000-kilometer fields of void mines, between which prowl monitor ships and enormous hunter-servitors of intimidating appearance, shielded from the vacuum's effects. Should invasion forces breach such a barrier, they will find that resistance only intensifies as they progress deeper into the system. In the darkness, soar powerful patrols of the Imperial Navy from the Solar Line fleet starships, their angular silhouettes foreboding doom to any who come into their sight. The gloom is pocked with observation chapels, fortress docks, fighter bases and countless gun platforms whose shipboard lumens shine like man-made constellations. Grey Knights of the Inquisition and Adeptus Mechanicus all hold fortifications within the Sol system with formidable defensive forces. Furthermore, as per the Throne World's edict signed by Guilliman, Terra and its neighbouring planets have been granted the right to muster numerous armies for self-protection. Considering the unceasing efforts of the Solar Watch and the presence of the Phalanx, the indomitable battle station of the Imperial Fists in geostationary orbit, it is evident that the Sol system is virtually impregnable to enemy armies. Yet there exist threats to the Golden Throne that are not so apparent, for which the Adeptus Custodes must maintain a special vigilance. Endless streams of pilgrims, traders, officials, adepts, fanatics, emissaries, refugees and many other people flow to Terra from all over the Imperium. Every day, thousands of starships emerge from the Immaterium, following strictly predetermined approach vectors to Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Luna, and the Throne World itself. Every planet and moon in the Sol system is surrounded by living and docking platforms, while celestial bodies with sufficiently solid surfaces are built up with colossal residential complexes, manufacturer, and city-sized fortifications. An inexhaustible river of humanity flows here along the space routes, and people are crowded everywhere. In such conditions, sedition, tumult, and heresy inevitably flourish. Naturally, it is the task of the Inquisition to eradicate them, and some of the most fervent agents of the Ordos devote their entire lives to this goal. Nevertheless, even the most pious servants of the Imperium can succumb to evil, such as nihilistic ideologies, the taint of chaos, or the living magnetism of xenofanatics. This is precisely why the Adeptus Custodes consistently maintain a presence in the Sol system, patrolling and combing it with their own forces. The Golden Legion controls the issuance of permits to the countless Imperial citizens who pass daily through the gigantic spaceports of Terra, and they also conduct sudden inspections of void defense lines. In doing so, the custodians do not adhere to any strict scheme or schedule, but instead follow only their intuition, so that no one can anticipate their actions and evade detection. Furthermore, The Custodians deploys spy servitor eavesdropping devices and information-stealing sub-programs in the hive cities of the Throne World and other planets. The Praetorians collect and analyze snippets of information obtained even in the darkest corners of the Sol system, feeding macrocogitators the size of battleships' data on population movements and work shift schedules, names of arriving starships, texts of demagogues' sermons, decryptions of Vox intercepts, and much more. By processing them, these massive machines produce daily data prophecies that assist the Captain General in making decisions, ensuring the 10,000 miss nothing. Finally, even the Phalanx, an integral part of Terra's defense, represents a threat. As ancient archives suggest, during the era of the Great Crusade, the Emperor often traveled the galaxy aboard this colossal warp-capable battle station. Back then, it served as the flagship of the Imperial Fists and remains the chapter's main operational base to this day. It is believed that during the heresy, this remarkable starship was positioned above Terra and participated in its defense. If so, the Phalanx somehow survived those catastrophic battles, as well as the conflicts of subsequent long millennia. The Star Fortress narrowly avoided destruction in the year of Cadia's fall. Initially, the fort was almost overrun by demons that invaded its decks while transitioning through the Immaterium. And afterwards, it battled against a traitorous armada wielding colossal firepower. However, the battle station withstood the onslaught of fate, successfully delivering many loyal warriors of the Imperium to the Sol system and assuming a position sanctified by centuries in orbit of the Throne World. Since then, the Phalanx has been undergoing restoration, returning to full combat readiness and purging the areas tainted by the corruption of chaos. The Citadel's sections are in constant turmoil, with crews of genetically enhanced workers scurrying back and forth, and the adepts of the Ministorum endlessly reciting their lengthy prayers. It's no surprise that the Adeptus Custodes easily infiltrated their agents there. These uninvited guests, hiding in plain sight, meticulously observed the events on the Phalanx, ready to take decisive action if necessary. From the Custodes' perspective, even the most loyal Space Marine chapters are theoretically capable of treachery. Praetorians, by duty, forget and forgive nothing, for they know how trust in the Primarchs ended. Therefore, if the Star Fort ever turns its guns on the Imperial Palace, the Golden Guardians will activate secret protocols and end the Phalanx even before the first shot is fired.